For decades, different people reported the same impossible encounter. Deep inside an isolated forest, they all described seeing the same thing, a motionless silhouette standing between the trees. It never moved, it never spoke. But the strangest part was not what they saw. It was the fact that every witness described it in exactly the same way, sometimes years apart. My name is Victor. I investigate unexplained cases, forgotten places, and events where the evidence always seems incomplete. Over the years, I have followed stories that appeared impossible to understand. But this investigation was different, because this time, the mystery was not only about a place that should not exist. It was about several people who claimed they encountered the same thing. The first time I heard about this case was through a message sent by a man named Samuel Carter. For more than 20 years, Samuel had kept a photograph locked away inside a drawer. He had never shown it publicly. He never even planned to talk about it. Until the day he discovered that other people had described something similar, a story he believed belonged only to him. In that photograph, there was a narrow road disappearing between the trees. At first glance, there was nothing unusual, just a forest road, a remote location, a landscape that could exist almost anywhere. But Samuel explained to me that the photograph had been taken only moments before something happened that he never forgot. Because at the end of that road, he did not find an abandoned building. He did not find a forgotten location. He saw someone. According to his testimony, a silhouette was standing between the trees, motionless, too far away to see a face, but close enough to understand one thing. The silhouette knew he was there. At first, Samuel believed he had simply seen someone lost in the forest, a hiker, a local resident. Any normal explanation was possible. But when he tried to get closer, the silhouette disappeared. Not by running, not by hiding. It was simply no longer there, as if it had never existed. That detail could have remained just a strange memory, a simple misunderstanding, an illusion created by distance or light. But several years later, another person described exactly the same thing. The same forest, the same road, the same location, the same silhouette. That was the moment the story became something else. Because one person can be wrong. A memory can change over time. But several witnesses describing the same impossible detail, that becomes an anomaly. I began by searching for a rational explanation. Someone living in the forest, a natural phenomenon, a shadow effect, a mistake in perception. But the more I investigated, the more one question kept returning. Why had so many people described the same presence in the same location over several decades? And most importantly, why did some of them claim they felt exactly the same thing? The feeling that they were not alone, the feeling that they were being watched, as if something was simply waiting for them to leave, before disappearing again among the trees. That was the moment when this investigation truly began, because the real mystery might not have been the road. The real mystery was what waited at the end of it, and why some people seemed to be the only ones capable of seeing it.
After hearing Samuel Carter's testimony, I thought the answer could be simple. A person in the forest, a mistake in perception, a play of shadows created by distance or lighting. It was the most rational explanation. But one detail prevented me from closing the case. Samuel was not only certain that he had seen someone, he was certain that he had felt something, as if that presence was not lost in the forest, as if it was waiting. So I started searching for other people who had experienced something similar. But I wasn't only looking for people who had seen a silhouette. I was looking for people who described the same sensations. And that was when I discovered the testimony of Laura Bennett. Her story began in 2008. She did not know Samuel. She had never heard about that road. She was not searching for any mystery. She was simply trying to find an old hiking trail in that area. Then she discovered a road she had never seen before. A narrow road, almost completely covered by vegetation.
a road that looked like it had been abandoned for decades. After walking for several minutes, she noticed something between the trees, a silhouette. But her testimony contained a detail Samuel had never mentioned. According to Laura, the silhouette was not simply standing still. It seemed to always remain exactly the same distance away from her. She moved forward several steps. The silhouette did not move. She moved forward again, still the same distance, as if the space between them could not change. At first, Laura thought her mind was playing tricks on her. She moved closer one final time, and that was the exact moment the silhouette disappeared. Not behind a tree, not by running away, not by leaving the area. It was there, and then it was gone. That detail could have been dismissed as a simple impression, but when I compared her testimony with Samuel's, I discovered something disturbing. Samuel had described exactly the same thing. The silhouette never approached. It never moved away. It always remained at the same distance, as if it was not truly occupying the same space as them. At that moment, I began searching for older records concerning that forest. I wanted to know if anyone had reported something similar before. After several hours of research, I found a document dating back to 1974, a report written by a former local forestry department. Inside, one sentence immediately caught my attention. Several visitors reported a motionless presence between the trees. I read that sentence several times, because it had been written more than 40 years before Samuel's testimony. But that was not the strangest part. The report also mentioned something else. The people questioned did not describe an animal. They did not describe an identifiable person. They all spoke about a presence they felt before they even saw it. From that moment, the investigation changed direction. I was no longer trying only to understand what the witnesses had seen. I was trying to understand why certain people seemed capable of perceiving this thing, while others walked through the exact same places without ever noticing anything. That was when I found the third testimony, the one belonging to Michael Ross. His story was different, because he had something the others did not. Evidence. In 2019, Michael was crossing the forest with a friend. They knew nothing about the history of this road. They had never heard about the previous testimonies. They had simply discovered the location by chance. Then they saw the silhouette. But this time, something else happened. Michael took a photograph. A single image. He simply wanted to keep proof of the place they had discovered. When I received that photograph, I thought I would find confirmation. But the analysis revealed something nobody had noticed before. The silhouette was definitely there. It was not a compression error. It was not a camera defect. It was part of the original scene. But when I enlarged the image, I noticed something behind it. Between the trees, there was an old metal structure, a sign, partially hidden by vegetation. The problem was that this sign no longer existed. I checked local archives, then older photographs of the area, and I discovered that the sign had been removed in 1974, the same year as the report mentioning a presence in the forest. At that moment, a new question appeared. How could a photograph taken in 2019 show something that had disappeared more than 40 years earlier? I still had no proof of anything supernatural. There could still be a rational explanation. An old, forgotten structure. A mistake in the archives. A misinterpretation of the image. But one thing was becoming harder and harder to explain. Why did this forest seem to preserve traces that time should have erased? And most importantly, why did certain people seem to be the only ones capable of seeing them? After studying the testimonies, the photographs, and the few traces found around the forest, I thought I had understood one thing. The people who entered that place had not simply seen something strange. They had all encountered the same phenomenon. But one question remained unanswered. Why did some people see this presence, while others, standing in the exact same location, noticed absolutely nothing? That question completely changed the direction of my investigation. I started searching for a connection between all the witnesses, their age, their occupation, the time they entered the forest, the weather conditions, the amount of time they spent there. At first, I found nothing. They had nothing in common. Different people, different years, different circumstances. But when I analyzed their testimonies more carefully, I noticed one detail. Every single witness had seen the silhouette after hearing the same sound, a sound that was difficult to describe. Some people mentioned a cracking noise coming from the trees. Others described a fast movement somewhere behind them. But all of them reported the same feeling, the feeling that something was moving around them, not in front of them, not behind them, around them, as if this presence was not trying to appear, but simply trying to be noticed. This discovery pushed me to return to the location. I wanted to understand whether this forest truly contains something unusual, or if the witnesses had simply interpreted normal events as something much more disturbing. I installed several cameras in the area where the sightings had been reported. For several hours, nothing happened. No movement, no unusual sounds, no silhouette. Then, at 6:17 p.m., one of the cameras recorded something. At first glance, there was nothing extraordinary. Only a section of forest, trees, vegetation, the fading light of the sunset. But when I reviewed the footage, frame by frame, I noticed something. Between two trees, for less than 2 seconds, a dark shape appeared. Too far away to identify, too brief to analyze properly, but clear enough to raise a question. Was this silhouette actually there, or was my mind simply trying to find a shape in the darkness? I sent the footage to several people without explaining what I was looking for. I only asked one question. What do you see in this sequence? The answers were different. Some people noticed nothing. Others described it as a shadow. But 3 people, with no connection to each other, used exactly the same word. A person. Not a shadow, not an animal, a person. This result proved nothing. A dark image can easily deceive our perception. But there was another detail. A detail I had missed at first. The silhouette did not appear randomly. It always appeared at the exact border between light and darkness, as if it remained visible enough to be noticed, but never long enough to be identified. From that moment, I began considering another possibility. What if this phenomenon was not an apparition? What if the witnesses had not seen something entering the forest, but something that was already there? This hypothesis could explain why nobody ever found physical traces, why the descriptions were so similar, why the silhouette always disappeared before anyone could obtain clear evidence. But one final discovery was about to make this explanation much harder to accept. While examining old photographs sent by the witnesses, I noticed something. An element that appeared in the same place every time. Not the silhouette, not a strange shape, a symbol, almost invisible. Carved into trees, present on abandoned structures, always placed at human height, as if someone, or something, had wanted to leave a mark. At that moment, the question was no longer only, what did the witnesses see in this forest? The real question became, who left these traces before the witnesses ever arrived? Because maybe the silhouette was not the beginning of this story. Maybe it was only a sign that something much larger was hidden behind it. After discovering the symbol appearing on the photographs, I thought I had finally found something tangible. For several days, I tried to understand where it came from. I wanted to know who created it.
why it appeared in this forest, and most importantly, why several witnesses had discovered it without ever mentioning it to each other. At first, I thought it was nothing more than an old marking, a symbol used by hikers, a sign left behind by a forgotten group, or maybe just a coincidence. But the more I investigated, the harder that explanation became to accept, because this symbol did not exist only in this forest. I started searching through old reports, local archives, forgotten photographs, and I discovered something I never expected. Other people had described exactly the same symbol in completely different locations, not in the same region, not during the same period, sometimes hundreds of miles away. But the details were always identical: a discrete symbol, placed at human height, carved into a tree, an abandoned structure, or an old surface, as if someone had intentionally left a trace, but never wanted it to be easily discovered. At that moment, a new question appeared. Was Blackwood Lane really the beginning of this story? Or was it only another place where someone had left a piece of a much larger puzzle? While searching through older testimonies, I found the account of a former forest ranger, a man who had worked in those woods for more than 30 years. He had never spoken publicly about what he had seen, but the moment he recognized the symbol on my photographs, his expression changed. He looked at me and calmly said, "I thought nobody would ever find this again." I asked him what he meant. He explained that about 15 years earlier, he had found the same symbol carved into a tree, deep inside an area where almost nobody ever went. But the symbol was not what disturbed him. It was what he found next to it. Footprints. Fresh footprints. As if someone had placed that mark only a few hours before he arrived. The problem was that he was certain of one thing. Nobody was supposed to know about that location. Even most people living in the area had no idea it existed. So one question remained unanswered. Who could have gone there? And more importantly, why leave a mark in a place where nobody was ever supposed to pass? After that interview, I decided to return to the forest one final time. But this time, I was no longer searching for the silhouette. I was searching for what it might have left behind. After several hours, I had found nothing. Then, near the location where the camera had recorded the dark shape, I noticed something. A piece of metal, partially buried in the ground. Old, covered in rust. At first glance, it looked like nothing more than forgotten debris. But after cleaning it, I recognized the same symbol, engraved directly into the metal. But that was not the most disturbing part. On the back, there was a series of numbers, a date, 1987. Everything changed, because the first known sightings of the silhouette happened years later, which meant one thing: the symbol existed before the phenomenon. Someone had left this mark, before witnesses ever started seeing this mysterious presence. But why? Was it a warning? A guide? Or proof that someone already knew what was hidden inside this forest? While continuing my research, I discovered one final document, a private report dated from 1987. It did not mention Blackwood Lane. It did not mention a silhouette. But one sentence immediately caught my attention. Observation of an unidentified presence. The date matched perfectly. 1987. The same year as the mark found on the metal. And underneath that sentence, there was a handwritten note. One single line. Do not try to understand what wants to be found. For several minutes, I remained frozen in front of those words, because they suggested a possibility I had never considered. What if some people had not discovered this presence by accident? What if, from the beginnings, someone already knew it existed? From that moment, my investigation completely changed. I was no longer trying only to understand what the witnesses had seen. I was trying to discover who had found this phenomenon before them, and why they had chosen to leave behind just enough clues so that someone, decades later,
would eventually find them.
The 1987 report was probably the most important discovery of this entire investigation. Because before finding that document, I was still trying to understand the origin of the phenomenon. A silhouette seen in the forest. Witnesses describing the same impossible encounter. Symbols appearing in different locations. But this report completely changed the nature of the case. It proved one thing. Someone had studied this presence long, before the first known witnesses ever talked about it. The question was no longer only, what did these people see in that forest? The real question had become, who already knew that something was there? I started searching for the identity of the person who wrote the report. But, like many other documents connected to Blackwood Lane, certain information had disappeared. Not destroyed, not lost. Removed. The author's name was gone. The exact location of the observation had been erased. Only one thing remained. A date, 1987, and one single sentence. Observation of an unidentified presence. For several days, I tried to find any trace of the person behind those words. Then, I discovered something that changed everything. The report did not belong to any official organization. It was part of the personal archives of a man named Daniel Hayes, a former independent researcher who had spent years investigating places connected to unexplained phenomena. But what caught my attention was not his work. It was the final page of his file, a page written only a few months before his disappearance. There was almost nothing on it, only one sentence. The problem is not knowing whether something is present. The problem is understanding why certain people are able to see it. For several seconds, I remained there, staring at those words, because they completely changed the way I saw the investigation. From the beginning, I had been trying to understand the silhouette, but maybe that was the wrong question. Maybe the real mystery was about the people who saw it. So I went back through every testimony from the beginning, and I discovered a detail that appeared in every single account. Before seeing the silhouette, they all described the same thing: an unnatural silence. Not the normal silence of a forest, something different. A complete absence of sound. No birds, no wind, no movement. As if, for a few seconds, the entire forest was holding its breath. And then the presence appeared. At that point, two possibilities were still open. The first was that something really existed in that forest, something we still do not understand, a presence that appeared only under certain conditions. The second was a more rational explanation, a combination of human perception, environmental factors, and unusual circumstances causing different people to interpret the same thing in a similar way. But one question remained impossible to answer. The visions might have had an explanation, but the symbols, the documents, and the traces left years before the witnesses ever spoke were much harder to explain. Before closing this investigation, I returned to Blackwood Lane one final time. This time, I had no camera, no witnesses, no evidence to collect. I simply wanted to experience the place myself. For several hours, nothing happened. Then, as the last light disappeared between the trees, I noticed something. A symbol, carved into the bark of a tree. The same symbol found on the metal object. But this time, there was something underneath. An inscription. A very short message. Victor. I froze, because my name was carved into the tree. Not a general message, not a warning meant for anyone. My name. As if someone knew exactly who would eventually arrive there. For a few seconds, I thought about the simplest explanation. Someone could have followed my investigation. Someone could have known what I was searching for. Someone could have prepared this. It was possible.
But one question remained. How could this inscription have been there before I even knew Blackwood Lane existed? I never found the answer. I never discovered who created those symbols. I never knew if the silhouette was truly a presence, or simply a human interpretation of something we cannot explain. But one thing is certain. Blackwood Lane was not just a forgotten road. It was not just a forest with strange testimonies. It was a series of traces left behind intentionally, as if someone wanted to make sure that one day someone would start looking. And perhaps the most disturbing part is not that some people saw something in that forest. It is the possibility that whatever was behind this story was waiting to be discovered. Now I want to hear your opinion. Do you think the witnesses truly discovered something beyond our understanding? Or do you believe there is a rational explanation behind this case? And most importantly, what do you think is the strangest detail of this investigation? The silhouette? The symbol? Or the fact that someone seemed to know this story before it even began? Share your theory in the comments. I read every response. If you enjoy investigations into mysteries, strange phenomena, and cases that still challenge our understandings, subscribe and turn on notifications. And share this investigation with someone who loves discovering hidden stories. I'll see you very soon for a new investigation.